Thank you. What's funny? I tried to get that to Zoom that I had, and I based it on what I've seen you do, man. And I hit AI companion instead of that, and it was doing all kinds of nonsense. And I still haven't figured that out, but it's another button, obviously. So we'll go ahead. I'll go ahead and call the Transportation Authority Calhoun County Board Workshop to order. And Madam Secretary, welcome. Would you roll call, please?
Okay, Eric Stewart,
Present.
Dr. Paul Watson, Maya Williams.
Here.
Amy Evans.
Here.
Naisha Morrison, Vivian Davis. Tom Copeland.
I'm here. Is here.
Check you all.
Thank you very much. And if I can have a review of the agenda and approval, motion to approve. It's been moved. Is there any support?
Support.
Okay. Are there any changes or updates, anything for discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Great. We'll go ahead and get into our discussion. I think that the first thing we have is a revisit of from the last workshop from the fare structure recommendation. And I think that our support folks, staff people have come back with some direction. Some really good discussion before, but I'm looking forward to seeing what that photo is.
Yes. So thank you. I'm gonna first give hats off to Christy and Matt who kind of evaluate the fare structures that we discussed last time. We went back, we ran some budget implications for what we discussed with the fare structure last time. And then we're coming back to you now with a recommendation based on what our internal discussion was, what our experience in the industry is. And then obviously based on how it impacts the budget. And so there's a slight delay from my screen to that one. So just as a quick overview from the last meeting on what the existing fare structures are. Again, this is just considering the public transit providers. So this is BC Go, Albion Marshall Connector, Battle Creek Transit, and Marshall Dial Ride. This doesn't include agencies that are subrecipients like Community Action or private providers. Obviously, we don't control their fare structure, but a long-term goal would be that eventually as a coordinated cooperative system, we are all on a similar fare structure with similar fare media so that we can interchange services. So keeping in mind that there was no baseline really for us to say there's a similar fare to just go with, that's where most of our discussions started last time. So a quick summary of our fare discussions based on our notes. The board would like to maintain the fixed route bus fares at $1.75. 85 cents for reduced fare, expand the fixed route reduced fare eligibility to not only include seniors and people with disabilities, but to also include veterans. We talked about low income populations and decided that we'll come back to that at another time once we get our feet underneath us. And obviously in that case, we would need to determine eligibility criteria. The senior eligibility would be at age 60. And then the people with disabilities would be the federally approved reduced fare process. So there's already processes in place for the seniors and people with disabilities. We have a veteran amongst us, two of them, that we're able to kind of bounce ideas off of for veteran fares on appropriate forms of ID to get that fare, what an application process for that fare rate might look like, and how to actually implement that. But the recommendation or the conversation amongst the board was that we would expand that reduced fare eligibility to include veterans. The board also asked us to go back and explore what zone-to-zone fares would look like for the demand responsive or on-demand services. So The, for example, a fare to represent a trip from Albion to Springfield or from Marshall to Battle Creek. As well as the in-zone services. So what would the fare look like if you stayed within a zone versus traveling from zone to zone? And then the board had also wanted to explore reduced fares on demand responsive services. Keeping in mind, federal regulation does not require a reduced fare on demand responsive services, only on the fixed route services, and then the ADA paratransit fare is governed by regulation. So as a team, we went back and we talked about what the board discussions were and where the board stood on fare recommendations. And we are coming to you to make these recommendations and would suggest that you take these to public hearing for public input and then go from there to adopt a final fare policy. So at the next board meeting, we will have a resolution for you guys to establish a formal process for what that fare change or fare structure looks like. Followed then by an opportunity for public comment or public open house to provide comment on the proposed fare structure. And then likely at the end of September or beginning of October, we would adopt a formal fare policy for implementation January 1st of 2026. So again, making sure we have enough lead time to not only follow the regulatory process, but also enough lead time to communicate with the public on what they can expect for these changes. Our staff recommendation agrees with the board on maintaining the $1.75 single ride fare, the 85-cent reduced fare, free transfers, free children 8 and under, removing the fare box height measurement that we talked about last time. And again, recognizing that we're not here to police age or ID and birth certificates. The driver's not intended to get in conflict with anybody. So assuming people are honest most of the time, children 8 and under would be free. Again, this is on fixed route. Maintain existing passes and discounted qualified human service organization fares. So we talked last time about our multi-ride passes that provide a discount, basically buying in bulk. And then we have contracted rates for human service agencies. So as well as students and things like that. So we are suggesting maintaining all of those existing passes, discount rates, and list of program participants that are eligible for that qualified human service organization rate. Now, there's a federal definition for QHSO, and that is typically what we follow. The organizations that fall under that category typically serve our populations that are in need and qualify for those services or reduced fares anyway, which is why we sell them the passes at a reduced rate. So standard businesses don't typically get a reduced rate unless they're buying a huge quantity of passes at one time, and then we'll negotiate a rate. But human service organizations, we automatically extend that reduced fare to. As a team and as an organization, we would continue exploring onboard payment options, fare capping, reloadable fare media. So your cards that you have a app-based reloadable fare payment, and then fare collection systems. So we talked last time a little bit about our really old fare boxes and not only the struggles that they give us, but the cost of collecting fare. So one of those fare boxes is about $30,000. If we were to put those on 45 vehicles, is it realistic that we're going to recover that cost in the lifespan of that electronic device? Obviously, there's grant programs out there. We'll talk about some grant programs later, but we'll continue pursuing grant programs to help purchase fare media and evolve our fare collection system. But we would be looking likely into 2027 for that. And that would actually give us enough time to get our feet underneath us here and then come back and with the implementation of a new fare system, be able to say, here's a new proposed fare structure that includes things like fare capping rather than having to purchase a bulk pass up front. So if we didn't talk about it last time, fare capping is the concept that not everybody has $50 at the beginning of the month to buy a punch pass. or whatever the monthly rate may be. And instead, as you use your payment method on the vehicle, it tracks it based on your account. And then it caps your fare once you reach what that pass would have been. So allowing people to still take advantage of that discounted rate without having to purchase it all up front. That does require, obviously, onboard technology that we don't have today, but that's the direction that we would be moving. Are there any questions, comments, discussion on the fixed route fare recommendations?
Are they different than,
No,
okay,
no, so we agreed with your recommendations on that. Some of the discussion going back and kind of rewatching the meeting and listening to the discussion that occurred, we had a lot of conversation that revolved around technology that isn't in place today. So our recommendation would be that we maintain what exists today and then spend the next year working on advancing it into the 21st century. Yes, sir.
Timeline you had mentioned all the way to January. So we're gonna be in operation October 1. So do we have to adopt these fares? You know, I mean, how can we charge fares that we have not adopted if we don't do it next month?
So we would be looking for that, either that last meeting in September that you guys would adopt that fare structure, or the first meeting in October. We would potentially hold a special meeting to formally adopt that.
So the public hearing, what is the time frame that how many days do we have to?
We would want to try to give a 30-day notice, so we're coming up on that time. My last slide has an announcement about some public input opportunities.
Yeah, because there's not 30 days between our second meeting this month and the second meeting of September.
Correct.
Unless we move that meeting or do a special or something.
And we may be looking at that based on some of the community events that I have to talk about.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm getting ahead.
Yep. Any other questions on the fixed route fare structure?
So the financial review will include kind of some of these nuances too.
Yes, so my recommendation for the full financial review, which is primarily impacted by the on-demand, is for our next, rather than a workshop, we have a finance committee meeting, and we truly spend 2 hours diving into the nuances of the budget.
Yep.
So today I'm going to give kind of a broad overview. At the August board meeting, I'll present a budget, and then we'll be able, before you guys adopt a budget, the finance committee will be able to dive into it in a 2-hour workshop.
Perfect. Any questions or what have you?
Comment on the fixed route, we're good?
So you excited, Kristen, about, I mean, well, there's the other side to this too is, yeah, we can come up with this plan, but I'm interested in hearing from others that are closer to the seat, the bus seat, you know what I'm saying? And how do you think the general ridership will interact with this change? Will it be difficult at first and then we'll get used to it? Will people go yay and run to that? Or what are some advantages and disadvantages from the on the ground service?
so for fixed route, because it's not making any drastic changes, I think you're gonna have the community support already because it's what they're used to paying. As long as, they can still get to the places that they're used to going and things like that, which I know is a bigger discussion for us to have in the future. I think you'll have support. I also think it doesn't make a lot of our current riders worried. So if we change fares and we change the amount of passes, then everybody's gonna wonder, well, what happens to my Battle Creek Transit Pass and can I still use it? And now your pass is cheaper, like, can I get a refund for this to get that pass? Like, I think staying consistent with our exact fare structure that we have right now, especially for this next year, will help us filter through some of the passes that do exist in the public right now, get everybody on board with using the system, and then we can make changes in the future if need be.
Kind of a transitional, that makes sense.
We have quite a few passes out in the community right now that are Battle Creek Transit passes that, again, focusing on the public outreach and communication with the transition, making sure people understand that those passes are still going to be valid. We're still going to continue to honor those passes that they purchased under Battle Creek Transit, and work through, that 2027 kind of vision. Hopefully all of those passes will be out of circulation, and we'll start transitioning people to ride Calhoun specific fares.
Currently, our transfers free or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Our paratransit fare recommendation, this was kind of another easy one, federal.
Wait, hold on.
Yep, sorry.
So, Matt, your Marshall folk, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they're in kind of the same boat. It's gonna
Yeah,
be-
100%. They're definitely gonna be in the same boat. As long as things stay, close to the same, I don't think we're gonna have any pushback. It'll be a pretty smooth transition.
Okay,
Mhm.
okay. How are you thinking, Roy?
I was gonna be quiet, but,
I'm not gonna allow that today, ma'am.
I do think that generally people will be happy that the fare has not gone up, but I do think that there may be some concern that they're paying the same price and they may not feel like they're getting anything else for it with the addition of paying taxes as well. So I do think that there may be some concern about that, honestly.
My response to that almost would be, you're paying the same price, but now we're gonna be offering you that expanded service
Yeah.
that we've talked about. Like, we anticipate that we don't continue to pull the fixed route buses off the road at 3:45. Like, I think that was the biggest hit to the community, not the dollar. So I think if we start looking at what that expanded service looks like from Monday through Friday, allowing people to access the cheaper fares to ride fixed route because it is expanded. Plus, then you start looking at what we do to door with expanding those hours to potentially 7 days a week at some point. I think then it starts making like, okay, our fares stay the same, but what we're getting is so much bigger than what we've had.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked the question, because I get, the general public's gonna look at it just like you looked at it right there.
I'm just going off.
I'm
of what they've
paying,
already
no,
said.
I'm paying more in taxes, right? And the fares are saying, what else, what am I getting? So that puts the onus on us to continue to repeat the value that's accelerated at that same rate that you're gonna get, and the experience you're gonna get is much different. Now, that only goes so far, but all of that technical stuff you just said, we gotta bake that into something that my 6-year-old can understand. You understand what I'm saying? It's gonna have to be messaged properly, consistent, and what have you, because some of these things are so technical that if we didn't do them, you would notice them immediately. But we did do them, you're like, yeah, I guess it's supposed to be like that. And we gotta make sure that folks understand the difference.
And that is definitely the sentiment I would say that we've heard in email and social media is, if I'm already paying for it through my taxes, why do I also have to pay a fare? And so we can work with the communications team on how do we message kind of what Christy said in a simpler way, so that people understand where the millage is going. And that if we were not to charge a fare, the millage rate would have had to been higher,
Yeah,
which isn't palatable. for
so we
people.
wouldn't survive that.
Yeah.
Somebody let Doug Farrell in.
He's the latest.
I'll tell him.
Which position is, yes. I'll tell him I said it.
So the next one was the paratransit fare recommendations from our staff. And again, this one was kind of an easy one, maintaining the $3 single ride rate. Remember that paratransit fares are capped at no more than 2 times the fixed route rate. So at some point, we could evaluate if this fare needs to be raised up to $3.50, which would be the federal cap that we could have. But for right now, we feel comfortable that this would be a $3 fare maintained at the $3 rate. There are no discounts or anything for this service. This is ADA certified individuals. And in transit speak, ADA is different than a general definition of ADA. So ADA has specific criteria in order for somebody to be ADA certified under the Federal Transit Administration. And it's directly related to their ability to use the fixed route system, not their disability specifically, if that makes sense. So as we transition to Ride Calhoun, Christy will be working on an ADA eligibility policy. Obviously, Battle Creek Transit, we have a application process that people go through in order to get ADA certified. We have a large number of people who are ADA certified that probably do not meet the qualifications. And this transition gives us a good opportunity to review that process, make sure that people who truly meet the eligibility criteria are getting approved. And then working with and communicating and educating the people who currently have ADA status that were maybe incorrectly granted that status under Battle Creek Transit, and walk them through what that means for them on Ride Calhoun. Now, fare-wise, it's not a huge difference in the fare. ADA passengers primarily get priority scheduling. And so they can call the day before and get next day priority service within the fixed route boundaries. So paratransit would only serve the city of Battle Creek and the city of Springfield within that 3/4 mile buffer of the fixed route system. And only those individuals who are unable to use the fixed route system due to a disability would be eligible for this service. We anticipate 2 or 3 vehicles being able to meet the capacity of that once we make that redetermination of ADA eligibility. Now, this will be a process that, again, we'd be looking to probably implement by January and start communicating with the public what the process for achieving ADA certification is with Ride Calhoun. And then Christy working directly with the passenger and our mobility manager to make that assessment, do travel training, and then determine if it's a conditional eligibility or a permanent eligibility. Obviously, I mentioned the mobility manager. We would make the recommendation that Ride Calhoun continue to budget for a mobility manager position. And that mobility manager is really that one-on-one interaction with individuals. I, again, equate it to a social worker for transit. Somebody who helps somebody navigate the transit system, find the best transportation option for them, which may not be us, and make those connections. And then obviously get out in the community and kind of be the face of it's fun to ride the bus. This is how you ride the bus, and encourage people to get on transit. Again, we would be looking at fiscal year 26 for implementation of the new ADA program under Ride Calhoun. And that would be coming to the board for approval of the actual ADA policy, which is federally required, probably in October. Are there any questions on the paratransit fare recommendations?
That policy, is that a public hearing, or is it just presented and then adopted?
Presented and then adopted, yep. And it's pretty boilerplate. FTA pretty much has the language of what your policy has to include set.
So what's the timing on that policy and that writer's guide? What's the ideal time?
So we would likely utilize King Media to help us with the writer's guide. The policy would probably be coming to you guys in October.
October beginning or end?
Probably the end of October.
There's a lot happening in October.
There is.
So.
Yes.
just
We're in
making sure.
sprint mode now.
Yeah. I agree with the mobility management piece. I don't agree with Ride Calhoun. This is just me personally reacting to what you said. I don't agree with that being a mobility social worker. I think that will move more to a mobility concierge. Yeah, it's a white glove treatment. You know what I'm saying? I want to put that connotation out there that to the general public that we are here to support you in whatever your mobility needs are, and that could go in many different directions. And based on our experience, your experience in this vehicle is going to get you to the right place at the right time. Kind of like what you would get with expert concierge service that's based on experience, not handing you a map and saying, good luck.
Yeah.
You get where I'm coming from? There's a
Yes.
difference, right? The other thing I want to put in the back of our minds is maybe these positions and how we frame them up for the organization. If we can start to put together a work chart
Yep.
of what we needed. I know you probably got it in your car, in your back pocket or something, laminated. But let's start teasing that out in a future workshop so that we know what we're talking about. So when we suggest something like this, for me, I can automatically see where it fits.
Mhm.
So I have one in my head right now. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, well, yeah, it was over here and we need that.
Yes.
And then put in,
Our mobility manager position is currently funded by MDOT at 100%. And we've been very lucky to have those funds continuously renewed each year. Obviously, the work we're doing in Calhoun County significantly impacts our success on obtaining that grant and then the renewal of that grant. MDOT did recently change the eligibility criteria and the process for awarding, and it is far more metric based, I guess. So before, I'm gonna say it was a narrative based grant where we kind of told the story and the reason why we needed this funding for this position. And now it's not a bad thing, but it's more metric based. So we have to be able to demonstrate goals and achieving those goals in order to continue receiving the money. And it is considered a competitive grant now, no longer just an automatic renewal.
Yeah.
And so we did secure those funds for fiscal year 26. So starting October 1st, we know we have another year of funding for that mobility manager position. But keeping in mind going forward, if we ever lost that grant or we weren't awarded that grant for a fiscal year, my priority would be to make sure that we've budgeted for that somehow to maintain that position.
That's a critical quality position.
It is.
That's the quality department.
Yes.
Right? And so I would sooner than later start teasing out, what does that look like if that's not awarded?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And how do we cover that? So as we budget that, maybe we have that in the background going, plan B is,
Yep.
you know, or plan A is, it's not awarded and plan B is
Correct.
great if it
Now we
is.
have an extra,
Yeah.
yes.
You
That's
know,
kind of my conservative approach to budgeting. I would budget with the assumption that we do not get the award, and then if we do, great.
yeah. Are there any other that were grant funded in that manner?
No, just
Okay.
the mobility manager position.
Okay,
And I'll get more into that in a minute when we start diving into grants, but the mobility management grant doesn't technically fund a position, it funds activities. And so so for example, right now Christy is our mobility manager. She has to keep a log basically of all of her work that she has done, what she has done every day, how many hours she has spent doing that. And then we submit that every quarter to MDOT.
Yeah.
They review it and make sure that those were all eligible activities under the Federal Mobility Management Program. There's been times where they're like, yeah, that's not an eligible activity. You have to back that expense out. But for the most part, we make sure that her work stays within the eligible area. And then we get reimbursed that quarter of expenses. So it isn't a position per se, it's activities. We just make sure that that position only does eligible activities. Does that make sense?
yeah,
If we play the game to break the funding.
no question. And that's what makes it a little bit risky.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So removing some of that and looking at what's worst case scenario. And how do we get this key quality position funded, if you know what I mean? Okay.
Dr. Watson, did you have?
You got answered,
Okay.
because I had a question, yeah, the where and when, the FTA and the policy draft already got, we're good.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next section, it's just slightly delayed. The next section that we're going to talk about is the on-demand and demand response fares. And this is where the board needs to have some deliberation today. We have two recommendations that will pop up eventually, I hope. We have two recommendations. The things that we talked about at the last workshop was a zone-based fare as well as a fixed fare. The board also discussed reduced fares for the on-demand services. Going back and looking at the budget, in order for us to meet the 7% fare box recovery rate that we were budgeting for, we would have to provide about 700,000 on-demand trips. That's probably not possible with the number of vehicles that we're anticipating on the road, particularly in the beginning. Based on that, we are making a recommendation that you guys consider two different fare options and give us direction on how you would like to move forward, or seek public input for how we would like to move forward. Our suggestion for a fixed fare would be a $5 flat fare. Whether you're traveling in the city of Battle Creek and staying in the city of Battle Creek, or you're going from Albion to Battle Creek or Albion to Springfield, your fare would be $5 flat. that would only result in about $130,000 difference from what we budgeted for fare recovery versus what we would anticipate we collect. Not an insurmountable amount. Zone-based fare would be based on distance. So I'm gonna pick out the $10 fare, for example, would be from Albion to Springfield would be a $10 fare, largest mileage. And that would be, you know, if you're staying within your zone, it would be $3. If you're going to other zones, it would be 5, 7, or 10 based on distance traveled. This would actually make us about net zero in a fare box recovery rate. But obviously would result in higher fares for those traveling longer distances where our cost is higher. Yes, Nan?
So with the strange geography that we have over in Springfield being somewhat surrounded by Battle Creek, I know I've heard there be discussions about Albion to the fort, which is actually Battle Creek going through Springfield.
Yeah.
So would the fort be in that case, because you were saying Springfield to Albion is like the furthest,
Mhm.
would the fort be considered part of
Yes.
the Springfield Fair in that situation?
I think we would probably have
How
to
would that work?
zone that out. As of right now, with the way that we mapped it out, we just did city limit boundaries. So if it fell within the city limit of Battle Creek, whether it was on the near side or the far side, it would be that rate within that zone, if that
So-
makes sense.
They would be paying, it sounds like potentially less to go to the fort than
Than
they
to go
would
to
to go to Springfield, even though it's further in that situation.
Yes, unless we did a mileage based, like, you know, 1 to 6 miles is this fare, 7 to 12 miles is this fare. That does raise some concerns with our ability to offer other fare payment methods with the technology provider. So if we're or fare methodologies, we can't mix flat fare and mileage based fare in the system.
So it almost seems like in that situation, you might have Springfield and Battle Creek be the same because
Yeah.
I think that would make it easier.
So can we do this?
Yeah.
This, my question, my observation.
Mhm.
Can we stop, as we have this discussion, referring to it as a Marshall, Battle Creek, Springfield fair?
Mhm.
It is the fair.
Mhm.
And it gets complicated when you try and put mileage to it and so on and so forth. These zones are the zones.
Mhm.
And Ride Calhoun has established these zones. They could be overlapping, I don't care how you cut it up.
Mhm.
But it has to make sense based on where people go. It has a logic of the density of folks have traveled here to there. Because then you start, the slippery slope is, well, is that stock that's in front of, what's that, not Brookside, but the other one on Dickman?
Mhm.
Is that in Springfield or is that in the Fort? That's in Springfield technically. You
Right.
get where I'm coming from? Now, to go 3 more blocks, if I stop there, it's gonna cost me this, and
I think Springfield and Battle Creek should just be all the same.
no,
thing.
the county is all one piece, and we cut these pieces up, and you're right, that would be in that same
So,
general zone, and it makes sense based on consumption, maintenance, and all of those things get rolled into that, and then that backs into the logic of this fare structure is fiscally responsible, and that's how, we just didn't pull $5 out of the air because it sounded good.
Right.
There's a reason for that. And it covers up to this point. We thought that there was, the reason is both equitable for the community, makes sense for the zone, and meets our budgetary constraints or promises. And the same thing for the zone thing is, now the way you explain that, that made logical sense.
Mhm.
You get me? But if we start from this board looking at it as,
Individual cities.
instead of individual cities, because you get the nuance of the slippery slope of Battle Creek City Transit, you know? And then folks are gonna start having issues with their general situation versus, hey, I get that I'm out here on this part of the county.
We have zone A, B, and C.
In theory, potential, yeah, that makes it very simple.
Make sure I understand you, Eric. So the fare from Albion to Marshall would be $5. I'm gonna just pick those, but from Albion to
Zone Z.
zone,
Z.
the west zone
Yep.
would be $7. Are you saying that?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were saying 5, it was 5 no matter where you wanted to go, and no, I agree with that, and I agree with what Amy said was treating Springfield and Battle Creek as one. We don't no longer have to worry about those city limits over there. Yeah, enclave of
Yes,
Amy's in my thing.
Commissioner,
No, I was just gonna say, I liked what you said, but I don't want us to necessarily treat Springfield and Battle Creek as one. I liked it better when you said the zones.
yes,
Like
Mhm.
Springfield and Battle Creek, parts of it may be in the same zone, but not all of Battle Creek will be the equivalent of Springfield. If you get what I'm saying, like, some, based on the zone, from Marshall to Battle Creek, it may be $7 to get here, but to get to the fort, that's in a different zone, although it is still Battle Creek, so it'll be $10 to get there.
that might be the industrial zone.
Yeah.
Or we may have fairs for industrial zones to help people, Ford may sit in, look at it like now I'm bringing my manufacturing experience into it. When we would send, over the road trucks out, you would have different states, but it didn't matter because the FedEx and all of those zones were cut up into territories. And it was based on something, but
It wasn't.
it wasn't state to state.
Yes.
I wasn't sending something to Kentucky, I'm sending zone 2.
And we can work with the technology provider if the board wanted to go with the zone-based fares. We could work with the technology provider to kind of establish those zones, not based on city limits or boundaries, but more on distance blocking, I'm gonna say. And so we say anything, zone A is this span of mileage and so on. We could work with our technology provider to see what the options are to set a flat fare based on zone rather than a fare based on miles traveled.
Yes. So can we check with that technology partner?
They can do that, because we've had that conversation already. Our biggest thing is just figuring out where we build the zones. Once we pick a go live date, so if you're saying these zones would go live on January 1st, in the meantime, I can be designing that on the back end with the app developer, and we can literally have a day where the BC Go fares shut off and the mileage-based system shuts off and the other one turns on. And we can build those zones in the background, and then it's just rules for if your pickup and your drop off is in these zones, it knows exactly in the back end what to charge you. So once we establish what are our zones and what are our fares, they can definitely launch that by January, and they said it's a quick fix.
Okay.
So if I give them a 4-week turnaround, they can complete the project.
Okay. So, Vivian, then I'll try and land the plane for your original ask.
Yes, I'm trying to conceptualize what it would look like from Albion. For instance, if someone wants to go from Albion to the VA hospital. So if we do the zones, they know it's going to cost me blah, blah.
Yep.
If we do the fixed route, they know. So, I mean, how will you educate the public, so to speak, in terms of the zoning?
Yep.
That will be different, in our mind.
So I would say from here on out, communication with the public is vital. So not only helping them understand what to expect and when those change and when to expect those changes, but as we're anticipating these changes, making sure they have the heads up for it. The app also lets people know what that fare is going to be at the time of booking.
Okay.
So educating people on how to use the app, obviously they can call and we can estimate the trip cost for them.
Right.
But it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody when they got on board the vehicle, what that fare is gonna be.
Yeah, 100%. So your original question, I'll put this out here. My thought is to get where we're going with each of these. I think that this is a public opinion point based on the technology works, it can be turned on immediately and what have you. But we have this conversation in our public forum and say, this is what we got. And our recommendation is one or the other, we want to hear your input.
Correct.
You're coming from, and me personally, if I had to vote today, I'm in the zone-based camp. Because it's, especially if the app tells me this is what I'm gonna pay before I, you know what I'm saying, I'm not on the bus and find, oh my God, it's gonna be $10 versus.
Right.
And you know, based on where you need to go in your VA example, that it's gonna be 10.
Yeah.
Probably before you even get an app,
Yeah.
or you can start tracking. That technology-based piece gives clarity to the ridership and to the system in terms of making sure we have our things covered. So I would say that we get those variables together for that public conversation and get, because the truth of the matter is,
Presenting the zone-based fare.
yes, $5 were, to your point, and correct me if I'm wrong, $5 rate, we're about 130, call it $150,000 short.
Yeah.
Depending. And what that shortage means is that money has to come out of somewhere.
Right.
So there's value to be expensed there. And if there's value to be expensed over a period of time, eventually I'm gonna have to make a gap. And unfortunately, it may result in a year and a half from now, you may see a $6 fare to make up some of that gap, to keep it at 130, 150. I mean, you see how that slippery slope and then that.
We don't wanna be unsustainable. We can't have shortages that, we can't operate very long that way. Unless you have a dedicated source, to fill that gap.
Yeah.
It's not sustainable.
Yeah,
And that's
no.
not what we wanna set ourselves
Yeah,
up for.
no, it's not I get why we're here, but it's not the proper business model that meets our budget. And it sends us into possibly the back end coming around later. Versus us being able to provide value somewhere else and then having someone pay that.
Correct. And as we talked about last time, the city of Battle Creek went 19 years without a fare increase. I would not recommend that the TAC wait 19 years
Right.
to reevaluate fares.
Right.
I would say probably leading up to every millage renewal request, we should do a fare workshop and not only seek public input on the fares, but also truly evaluate where our fare box recovery rate is, what our goal rate is, and if the fares need to be reevaluated. And it is always possible, I think, like you said, unless there is a dedicated source to offset that, it is possible that some philanthropic group may say, here's $200,000 a year to be able to do that. And obviously we pursue every grant opportunity we can, but we wouldn't want to go into it without that in place already.
Right.
If that happened,
Great.
that would be great. Then we would offer a carnival time where the fare would be discounted and so on and so forth. I mean, that would be a celebration.
Yeah.
But that's not a sustainable model for a ongoing piece.
Yeah.
Unless you sign a contract, that's it, for the next 15 years, this is what we're gonna do.
Right. Can I ask, the zone-based fare, I thought I heard $3, $5, $7, and $10. Are those set, or could it be 3, 6, 9 if we just do 3 zones, or 3, 5, 10? I mean,
Really, right now, it's just us running scenarios in Excel spreadsheets.
Mhm.
So we could explore whatever range you wanted. And we could explore 3 zones versus 4. We could even break the larger geographic areas up into multiple zones and say, maybe the east side of Battle Creek is its own zone and the central part of Battle Creek is a different zone. Really, we could do it however we get to design the zones and what they are.
Dr. Watson
Dr.
has-
Watson has, yeah.
Then,
No, I'm sitting here going, it could get complicated
Complicated.
quick. And as long as I have a logic I don't care if it's 3, 6, 9, 12, whatever, as long as we have logic for each one of those pieces, I like to lead with that versus us cutting this up. Because then the next stopgap is, let's make it 350.
Mhm.
And 370, what if we put down a quarter? That,
So what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is from the technical perspective, we need to have a zone versus a mileage for this future things that we want to bring on work. So what we're thinking of doing is using the mileage as the basis to create the zones, then offer it on a zone perspective, so then be able to cut and slice and dice as we need to in the future. Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other, so I like that plan. I think that's a reasonable way to approach it. My other question relates to the, when you're thinking ahead, because this has happened on our campus where we've had to like, okay, if this gets larger, let's not have to redo our number, right? From a confusion perspective. So something as simple as this is something that we've done, is if we start with 3 zones or 4 zones, then make it 10, 20, 30, 40. So that way, if you create zones that are around different areas, it's a 11, it's a 12, it's a 13, where it's around whatever your zone 10 is.
Okay.
And then that way it builds really quickly, because it becomes crazy. Because if you're looking for not having to re-communicate every single time,
Mhm.
you don't want to have zone 1 change like every 2-3 years.
As
right?
we're community.
Yeah,
person.
so my question to you would be to think, well, not question or just a statement is, and I think you're doing this again already, so I'm just stating what I think is already happening. But be strategic in how you name your flagship zones.
Okay.
Right, or flagship, because if a township joins on and they're right next to Battle Creek, I would say that could be an 11, right? That could be a 12, right? Because that's all centered around where zone 10, maybe that's Battle Creek is. And that sets you up to not have to re-communicate every single time, right? So if your flagship is zone 10 will never change.
Yep. And then you just build in the
Correct.
ones around it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yep.
Two questions. One, one's a statement. I like Battle Creek Springfield as one zone. That's just personal opinion, but you have to do your work and I'll accept whatever comes back. Other question I have is to ride the paratransit, it's $3.50.
$3 up to $3.50. Yeah, we could go up to $3.50, but right now we're recommending 3.
Okay, what I'm asking is if the fare for the the difference between the flex and the move, you know, if one's gonna be cheaper and you're in Battle, I'm using Battle Creek as an example. Well, I'm gonna choose the cheaper of the two. Because I can go get a flex for $3 to get around the zone there. Or why should I call a max, or I'm sorry, a move, I'm gonna get those down sometime, for $3.50. So I'm just, I guess, cause you wanna have that flexibility. That makes sense, or did I lose
it does.
everybody on
Yep.
that?
Because we had the opposite. I'll let Christy tell while I reconnect.
So the difference is the one, you have to be ADA certified.
Right.
So the nice thing, right now, we currently commingle the services. So we have ADA passengers who ride with general fare passengers on our teletransit. And we are getting that overlap where today they're riding teletransit, tomorrow they're riding BC Go. Some days they have a trip booked on both systems and we show up with 2 vehicles to pick them up. So that's where we're really big on separating them. One will be strictly for ADA certified passengers. The general public cannot ride on that, and it's only in the area where fixed route is provided. So that is just strictly Battle Creek and Springfield. So it doesn't affect any of the other zones that we will be traveling to. And then when you look at RC Move and you want to move the other zones, that's the only option for you. So now the fares don't have to be as comparable, but that's where we left it at that $3 rate, because if we're looking at the zone structure and we say if you're traveling within a zone, that zone is $3, it's equivalent to the ADA. And now we're not competing to be certified on one versus a general passenger on another.
I just didn't want people to go just because one was cheaper, and so, okay, I'm good.
We get that now, and that's part of where we're trying to be so strategic with this, because it is super frustrating when you show up and you have one driver who pulls up in a teletransit van and within 2 minutes a BC Go pulls up and they're picking up the same passenger. And it's because one person's booked it on their app, they forgot they scheduled it, then they call and book it over the phone. and it defeats the whole purpose, right? So by truly separating those two services and having one be strictly for certified and one be general passenger, we won't have those duplication of service anymore.
And, we saw kind of that the opposite thing happen when we launched BC Go. People who, at the time that we launched BC Go, our ADA fare was only $2 and our BC Go fare started at $3. We had ADA certified individuals who could get priority service for $2, choosing to use BC Go at the higher fare rate. And so we recognized then that people will play kind of the fair game, but also if the convenience and experience is different and worth it, they'll pay more. So they were foregoing their priority scheduling because they liked this vehicle better, because this service offered an app, or, yeah. Yeah.
You didn't have to call in to book your ride. You can do it at midnight on your phone.
Yeah.
So there's the perks of technology that will get them to stay with the one side.
Convenience of that.
See why I use the term concierge? It's different than social worker.
Yeah.
Concierge gets you to that better experience.
So one of the biggest things I want to draw your attention to here is that when we left the last workshop, we came away with your discussion noting a higher rate for the city of Battle Creek. So if we look back at the notes from the workshop, originally this board had discussed reduced fares for the on-demand services. Based on the number of individuals that typically qualify for those reduced fares, so seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans, that would be a significant hit to the budget, especially at that fixed fare rate, or even the zone-based fare being $3. Now we're recovering only $1.50. Our recommendation is that we do not provide reduced fares on demand responsive services, as it's not required by law. The technology, we would put an increased prioritization on ride sharing. So again, keeping that fare low, but focusing on efficiency, where our goal is always to match trips and it's a shared ride. It's not a taxi. We're not going directly from point A to point B. We will adjust the ride matching parameters, which may extend the length of time somebody is on a vehicle, but provide operational efficiencies for us up to a cap, right? So we can put a level of tolerance for the passenger and how long they can be on board the vehicle. And then lastly, rather than those discounted fares, promoting mobile trip wallets like we have with BC Go, where you can purchase kind of credits, trip credits at a discounted rate. So for example, if you buy $50 worth of trip credits, your account actually gets loaded with 60, offering a little bit of a discount for passengers. And we can adjust that to any interval starting at, 10, 25, 50, 100, to provide some level of discount for individuals. Again, going back to the Battle Creek Fair that we talked about last time, we came away from the last meeting talking about Battle Creek fares being higher than other fairs. After our internal discussions, our recommendation would be to maintain equitable fares across all of the communities and zones, and not necessarily change the fare structure in Battle Creek just because Battle Creek has the fixed route bus service.
Yeah, my notes say that Battle Creek would be $5 one way during fixed route hours and then $3 after fixed route hours.
Correct.
Last time.
So we have been exploring a new technology platform from the BC Go one that we have now. We know that we're moving away from the BC Go platform. We will be procuring a new ITS system, which is Intelligent Transportation System. And we've been asking kind of these specific questions to the technology vendor about what kind of unique things can we do? How can we incentivize multimodal trip planning and things like that? The last demo that we saw actually allows you to make a multimodal trip and allows us to be able to incentivize that trip. So for example, if we're looking at that zone-based fare, we could incentivize a trip where the person, I'm gonna say Albion, comes from Albion to the transfer center and then hops on a fixed route bus for free maybe to get out the rest of the way to the fort. saving us obviously the operational costs and then incentivizing the efficiency. We go back and pick up a different door-to-door passenger. Well, that passenger finishes their trip on fixed route bus. So allowing people to use multiple modes of services to complete one trip. And then obviously incentivizing that through technology.
Matt, how much percentage wise in Marshall, how much are reduced fare riders? Because that's where it's gonna hit, because we will no longer have the reduced fare, right?
Correct.
It's over 50%. I'd say somewhere in the 60% range.
Those 60% of the people that have been riding Marshall Dial Ride now are gonna take a hit.
Yes. And this is to Vivian's point earlier, communication. Ensuring we lead up to this pretty strongly with community outreach and education on what people can expect, why the fares are changing. You know, kind of what is the cost benefit analysis for the passenger.
The why will be important.
Yes, yeah. You know, there isn't a significant difference from the Marshall fare. If they're staying within Marshall, right?
Mhm.
The general fare, not the reduced fare. But no, they don't have to stay in just Marshall. They can go to Battle Creek and again, the why is you have an expanded reach of communities you can go to, and that's what this fair reflects.
And they will also see the increase in technology that they've never had in Marshall.
Right.
And even your dispatcher system obviously will be upgraded and stuff too. So I think that offsets some of the costs in communicating that too. Like there's gonna be additional technology features and stuff that is going to enhance the way you move around Calhoun County as well.
Additional convenience.
So how could, we can talk later if you don't want to get in. Senior millage gives the Lions Club money for free Wednesdays for seniors. Is there a way that the if senior millage decides to continue to give it to the Lions Club, that could be used to assist people? Or is it going to be way too confusing? Because senior millage is going to have to make some decisions coming up here, and Lions Club, you know, may or may not be around next year, but you know, they're used to free Wednesdays also. So I'm just thinking, you don't have to answer it now if you're not ready
Yeah,
to.
I honestly don't know the answer to that question. Christy and I can go back to our technology provider and ask what that would look like for implementation.
It's super hard to do. We spoke about it when Matt and I were building out the program for Marshall when we thought they were originally coming on the platform. We could not do it because of the way our zone system is right now, and with us being mileage based, that's that where you can't run mileage and flat rate at the same time. So there wasn't a way for us to turn off the system for free fares unless we turned it off for everyone, that it was free fares. And so I don't know if we can zone it in, like once we do build out the 4 different zones or 3, however we go. I don't know if we can say for this zone, it's a free Wednesday because of sponsorships. Could be a possibility once we zone it. But we can have those conversations with them.
Yeah, so that's gonna affect the Marshall ridership that have been
In
pretty well.
a lot of the technology demonstrations that we've seen with micro transit or on-demand transit, it isn't paratransit, right? There isn't an eligibility to use it. And so what we've found as we've explored the different platforms that are out there is that a lot of these providers don't collect personal identifying information. They don't collect date of birth. They don't collect age. You know, the intent is that this is just like Uber or Lyft, right? You create an account, you create an account, you book a trip and you go. You don't need to fill out a bunch of stuff and your personal information because there isn't an eligibility or a qualifier to use the service. It's open to everybody. And so we've asked all of our different technology providers, what does that look like and what does that mean as we talk about offering a reduced fare based on age or things like that. So that might be something for us to look at is if the platform isn't collecting age as as a piece of information within that person's profile, how do we determine eligibility for that free fair Wednesday?
Yeah, because using myself as its case, I'm paying $260 a year in my taxes. I am now getting free Wednesdays. And now I'm gonna still pay the $260 a year in millage.
Plus,
Now I'm gonna be paying for that ride. So that's gotta be some pretty good messaging there.
Okay.
my cellular connection, I don't have very good Verizon service in this conference room. So it's
Are really thick in the building.
so it's reconnecting right now. Are there any other thoughts or discussions that we could capture and make sure we work with King Media on communicating when we seek this public input?
Yeah, it'd be nice to have a fear box recovery graphic.
Okay. Like what that means?
Yeah, a real simple piece. Because the starting point to all of this is, it doesn't cost $3 for a ride.
Yeah.
It does not.
Yes, even the $10, it doesn't actually pay for the cost of the ride.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If I have that starting point, that's a different conversation.
Yes, you know, I always,
That's where your tax dollars are going. You start talking about, am I paying for service?
I always compare it to like Uber or Lyft, right? There's a reason why the average fare on Uber or Lyft is, nearly $30 one way for a trip. And that's an individual, the independent contractor using their own vehicle at their own maintenance intervals.
And
Doing their own thing.
and there's an argument over whether they're getting paid enough of that money.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean.
That's why you tip.
Yeah,
Oh, they
yeah.
want tips.
Yeah.
Oh, is that's what's supposed to be happening? Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
based on time, I know we need to message some of this stuff,
Yes.
come back and look at that. I know that our publicity friends will give us a run of show on public workshops and things of that nature. And I think that we'll have a session on what that looks like going forward as we explain these things and how that'll work.
Yes.
Okay.
And, I think we are all clear, and I don't anticipate a lot of public comment on the fixed route or paratransit fares. I think we're gonna have a lot of community discussion on the on-demand or demand responsive fares. And we'll work with King Media to help communicate the why behind those fares. But we'll proceed with the zone-based fares. We will all go back and kind of work out what those zones might look like and what the corresponding fares will be.
And what those other deals in the communities were and how we crack that nut. Whether it's through and I'm shocked that the new system can't, I know it's zone based, but it can't do what geo mapping or something like that.
It can, so right now we just have the whole county, so keep in mind
One
BC
zone.
Go, BC Go was countywide, and so it was just one big zone with the fare being calculated based on mileage.
Yeah.
And so when we tried to overlap a zone with a flat fare in it to cover Marshall, they didn't work
Yeah.
together. So either it has to all be flat fare or it has to all be mileage based. You can't intertwine the different fare types when you overlap the zones
With the current technology.
with the current technology, correct?
Yeah. Okay. All right, we're back up or?
Yep.
Okay, we want to move to the financial and grant review.
Okay, so the intent of this portion is to help familiarize you guys with our primary funding sources and the way that we're grading funds right now. as we prepare for a budget presentation at the next board meeting. So at the end of this month, I'll present a proposed budget, followed by a budget workshop for the finance committee, and then formal adoption of the budget prior to October. Keeping in mind our fiscal year is October 1 through September 30th, in line with the state and federal fiscal years. Our designated recipient status takes effect that October 1st and makes us eligible for these sources of funding. So the first area we're going to cover is operating assistance. When we talk about operating assistance for our system, there's currently 2 primary operating assistance grants, and these are formula grants. So these are not competitive grants. These are grants that run through a formula either at the federal level or the state level to determine how much money we get. Section 5307 is specifically for urbanized areas over 50,000 in population, which is us. And then that only covers our urbanized area. So TACC or Ride Calhoun will operate both urban and rural service. We have to provide the state of Michigan and the feds a cost allocation plan to say what is the methodology we're going to use to break out those rural expenses from the urban expenses, because our rural expenses would not be eligible for the 5307 funding. The local bus operating assistance is state funds. That comes through Act 51. It goes through the Comprehensive Transportation Fund, and that is also a reimbursement based, but it gets paid monthly from MDOT based on the budget that you submit. So we are submitting our budget to MDOT right now for TACC, and they will pay us 30%, 30.5% of our eligible budgeted expenses, broken up into 12 payments over the course of the year. We monitor that closely to make sure that we're overpaid and owe money back to MDOT at the end. So I think I've mentioned it before. This is one area where being under budget is not a good thing, because now you're going to owe money back to MDOT because their payments to you were based on your budget. So if you're under budget, you're going to owe money back to them. And then vice versa, if you're over budget, they're going to owe you money. Statutorily, they're not required to make you whole. MDOT does. But again, operating environments are different under different administrations. And so I wouldn't ever want to bank on that. We'd want to, closely monitor our budgets and make adjustments prior to the fiscal year ending. The reimbursement percentage for fiscal year 26 that we are budgeting for is 30.5895. They go all 4 decimals. This is down roughly 10% from the last 3 or 4 years. So we have, I'm going to say since COVID, been at about a 40% reimbursement rate. Statutorily, we're able to go up to 60%. So if the state were to adopt a budget that supported public transit to the highest level, that means 60% of our eligible operating expenses could be reimbursed. In my 15 years in this, I've never seen us get to 60%. I think high 40s is probably the highest I've ever seen. And then urbanized areas are at a lower percentage, urbanized areas over 100,000. So in MDOT's case, we are considered a rural area. In the Fed case, we're considered an urban area. And so it's just it for us to have to worry about on the back end of allocating costs to the right places. And you hear me use the term braid all the time. Make sure we're braiding the funding correctly. Yes.
Okay, so some of the numbers you're referring to. You talked about the population for these areas. Are you using all of the 4 cities as the area and it's a total? Or do you have to go by where and segment it by Battle Creek, Marshall, etc.?
So we have to use the census designated urbanized areas. And so in that case, the census designated urbanized area for Battle Creek is actually broader. It includes, it pretty much follows our MPO boundaries. So it includes parts of Penfield, Bedford, Emmett. That is considered our urbanized area.
Okay, thank you.
So you couldn't just use the county, since we're, a county transit system, you couldn't use the county's population, or you would want to, or?
You wouldn't want to,
Okay.
and no, because the whole county is not designated urbanized. The county actually has a combination of small cities, rural task force, and urbanized area. So we have 3 different pots of money that we put in there. Yeah. One that I forgot to put on here is 5311, and that is specifically for rural systems. So the city of Marshall currently gets 5311 operating assistance. That's paid quarterly at about 18.5% of your eligible expenses being reimbursed. So if we look at our rural expenses, we have a combination of LBO, which is estimated at 30.5895, and the 5311, which is estimated at about 18%, to bring us up to almost 50% of our rural expenses being reimbursed by the state, and then 50% of our urban expenses being reimbursed by the feds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was wondering about the rule.
Yes.
Because that means you don't get reimbursement for it, but there is.
There is,
A
yep.
mechanism, okay.
Yes, and it's just a matter of getting that methodology for calculating that service, in which case, right now, we are gonna use hours of service
Mhm.
as that breakdown. Hours of service provided to establish the percentage and then apply that percentage to our expenses.
Right.
And did you say 5311 is federal or state?
It is federal, but it flows through the state.
Okay.
That was a yes and no question. Sorry. So that was operating assistance. And then now our primary sources of capital are section 5307, which we just talked about as operating. You could also use for capital. Our budget uses 5307 for operating, but also puts about $300,000 a year aside for capital outlay. So in the event we had a project that we needed to complete, a vehicle that we needed to replace, we could separate some of our 5307 funding to supplement a capital purchase, as well as the rest of it for operating. So the 5307 pot of money that goes through a formula from the feds can be used for both things depending on what your needs are. However, the percentage differs. So if you're using that 5307 pot of money for capital, it's 80% of the total project cost. If you're using it for operating, it's only 50% of the total project cost. So when you use that funding for capital, the state covers the remaining 20%. So that is a 100% funded capital project versus a 50% funded operating project. The other capital funding that we get is section 5339. 5339 is eligible to all systems. So Marshall gets 5339 that flows through the state. We get 5339 that comes down directly as part of a formula. Because of the size of our system in our urbanized area, we don't get a ton of this formula funding. Our 5339 amount is roughly $125,000 on the federal side. And then the state, keeping in mind that 125 represents 80% of the total project cost. And then the state makes up the remaining 20%. Now, constitutionally at the state level, the state is required to provide at least 2/3 of that 20%. There could be a time in the future if the state ever had a budget crisis where we could be responsible for that remaining 7% of that capital project. We, right now, are using that section 5330 funding for a slew of projects, but because we only get a little bit at a time, sometimes there's projects where we can't do a project for 4 years because we need 4 years worth of that money accumulated to be able to spend it. So that is where our long-term planning and capital planning comes in, is ensuring that between competitive grants and formula grants, we are allocating our resources correctly. Are there any questions on the operating or capital grants? Now, these grants that I just talked about, these are all formula. We still have to apply for them every year, which is our, our grant administrators process. But they're not competitive. So even though we have to apply for them, they are appropriated to us through the congressional budget process. All we have to do is go in, fill out the correct things, certify the correct things, and then we can draw down those funds. All of our funds, different from what most people are familiar with in the grant world, are reimbursement based. So we've talked about this since TACC started, that we need money in order to operate, because this money isn't available until we've actually demonstrated that expense. And then we can reimburse ourselves up to the federal cap. But we need to have money in order to incur that expense before we can draw it down.
Let me ask you this.
Mhm.
Administrative question. So the two of you capture and submit all this
Yep.
data annually to receive these reimbursements and manage the reimbursements. That's before you get into the panic of, is this gonna happen?
Yeah.
The two of you.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah. we have a
City of
small
Battle,
team.
yeah, the city of Battle Creek does you purchasing or anybody else that do any of that. There's no secret.
Well, they
grant.
have their own department. They did very well. Let me be proud for her real quick.
Yeah, transit is its whole own world. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we do all of our own. So the city of Battle Creek has a grant administrator, but we have our own just because of the complexity and
Okay.
number of grants that we have in transit.
That was a very diplomatic way of saying that we're not gonna get the attention to get all this money if we relied on just them. I'll say it. Okay, let's keep going.
So then there are a slew of other grants that we're also eligible for. And you hear me say the word braid all the time. This really is a complex game of braiding the right types of funds to get to the right end result. Depending on what it is we want to do, we want to look at what are the eligible projects. And I'm not going to say FTA hates us, but we move money around a lot. Like this new funding source became available. So instead of using this money to do that project, that's an eligible project over here. And now I'm going to use that pot for something else that wasn't previously eligible. And that's where, yeah, I know Jeff is on the call, but that's where our MPO is great. And we love having a small MPO that can help us be really nimble on those changes, because all of these projects typically have to go through the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan, which is managed by BCATS. So some of these funding sources are actually allocated to BCATS and not specifically to Battle Creek Transit. So not only is it a game of knowing what our formula funding is, but also what other funding sources is transit eligible for that people don't want us to know about. And I'm gonna give you a good example of, we have a great relationship with our MPO, but not every community does. And there's a lot of sentiment in some of those communities that roads, bridges, non-motorized paths are more important than transit. And so there isn't a lot of sharing of those pots of funding. My experience here, that has not been the case. BCATS has equitably distributed their funding. CMAQ is a perfect example of that. That is a federal highway funding program that is meant for congestion mitigation and air quality. So traditionally it's road projects, it's highway projects, things that reduce emissions. We can use that for a slew of other eligible activities like marketing to encourage people to use the bus and clean commute. We can use it for new vehicle, clean diesel vehicles, electric vehicles. Again, it's an air quality program, so focusing on greenhouse gases. We can use it for all kinds of other things, as long as our MPO and those on the MPO board are open to distributing that money to transit or flexing that money from FHWA to FTA. That's a whole internal process to move those funds from highway to transit, but we've been very lucky to be able to secure a significant amount of that funding over the next 4 years of this next TIP. to implement traffic or transit signal priority. So essentially our fixed route bus system will be similar to emergency response vehicles, where as we're approaching intersections, if we meet the parameters, we would be given green lights to keep us on time and efficient. Now, our goal is to do this jointly with the city and emergency responders so that we can utilize our transit funding to make an improvement for us, but now we've also equipped all of the signals with this technology, and all they have to do is equip their vehicle to be able to utilize what we just installed at the signal. So a cooperative purchase, thanks to BCATS allocating those funds to us. Another example is the Rural Task Force and Small Urban Funding. That is kind of the rural version of MPOs. So that's the rural version of BCATS. That would be for smaller projects that primarily serve the rural areas or the small cities like Marshall and Albion. So for example, Marshall Dial-A-Ride has received vehicles funded through Rural Task Force. The good thing for us is that we can usually get small things quickly funded through these programs, because as road projects may have cost savings or they're looking at allocating the funds, it's not a ton of money. It might be $1 million for the year, and you can't do a significant road project for $1 million. So us asking for 15,000 off the top to replace computers or things like that isn't really an argument at the table typically. The other capital funding source we talked about was the mobility management. So again, we consider that a capital project because it doesn't fund a position, which would be operating, it funds activities. And that's also funded through the 5310 program. We have subrecipients of our 5310 funding, and that would be like Community Action Agency, CIR, Marion Birch. That's how they purchase their vehicles, is 5310. We also have some 5310 eligible activities that happen within our rural system that could make rural vehicles eligible under that program. 5310 primarily focuses on seniors and people with disabilities. And so in order to be eligible for that service, you want to be able to demonstrate that at least 51% of your service is serving seniors and people with disabilities. Again, that's why we always have those conversations with the technology providers about how can we capture that information, even if we are talking about microtransit or on-demand services. That data can still be valuable as we try to secure additional funding sources. And then we have planning activities as well. One of the current planning grants that we have is for architecture and engineering. Obviously, we've talked about the need for a new facility. Our existing facility is far too small to support the growth that we anticipate. And so we've received a grant to be able to do a study, site selection, and need assessment from an architecture and engineering firm. Under the operating side, we have something called specialized services. This is funding that we share. You guys are familiar with LAC, our LAC, but there's also LCC, and that's the local coordinating committee. That is nonprofit providers that we pass funds through based on passengers or miles to reimburse them for some of their expenses for the trips that they've provided. Each year, we have an application process that allows new providers to apply to be eligible. Again, that's serving primarily seniors and people with disabilities, and it does have to be open door transportation. So it has to be transportation available to the general public. It can't be private transportation, for-profit transportation. It does have to be general public, public transportation. And that's where we talk about those other community providers that we already coordinate with, like Community Action Agency, Marion Birch, and CIR. New Freedom is a funding source that's phasing out, but that the state of Michigan has continued to support. And prior to our service reductions in Battle Creek, we received roughly $500,000 in New Freedom funding. New Freedom is, for us, we use it to supplement operating expenses after fixed route bus service has come off the road. So we allocate our expenses, again, another cost allocation, but we allocate our expenses after 7 p.m. at the time, after 7 p.m., all go to this New Freedom program, which is reimbursed at 50%. rather than using the same 50% pot of money from the 5307 funding that we were talking about earlier, anything after 7 PM, we reimbursed with the new Freedom money from the state. We are going to continue to apply for those funds. We have not utilized those funds for the last 3 years, I think it's been, since we reduced service. So now that we're not running service after 7 PM, we didn't have any eligible expenses. MDOT has continued to award it to us in anticipation of us bringing back service. And so we do expect that it'll continue to be part of our budget moving forward. And then competitive grants. A lot of people at this table received requests from us to do letters of support. Thank you for those letters of support. There are competitive grants that can fund pretty much any project we could dream of, from a whole new facility to studies to research and development. And we try to evaluate based on what we have the internal capacity to actually see through. We tend to evaluate which ones are the ones we're most likely to apply for. And it's typically these 3 listed. So that's the Raise or Build grant. It changes names back and forth over the last couple of years. That is a program that funds roads, bridges, airports, transit. It is all US DOT eligible systems are eligible for Raise or Build. So we're competing obviously against major highway renovations. And this is a huge pot of money at the federal level. In this case, we asked for the maximum award amount, which was 25 million. And then the state match to that would be roughly 6 million. Low and no emissions. This is a specific competitive grant program for low or no emissions vehicles. Now, there's criteria in order to be eligible for this. So I can't just say, yeah, we're going to go fully electric. There are some criteria such as staff training, facility assessments, things like that would have to be done first. So some of these grants have a planning grant that would come first, followed by an actual implementation grant second. Our success has most recently been with the 5339B, the Bus and Bus Facilities Program. We received in 2021, I think it was, we received Bus and Bus Facilities just shy of about $7 million to replace 70% of our fleets. Between that and additional funding, we have replaced nearly 100% of our fleet and actually expanded our fleet. So the purpose of this grant is to help agencies maintain a state of good repair. We use our transit asset management plan to identify our tolerance for state of good repair. Federal baseline useful life is 12 years for a fixed route bus, 5 to 7 years for a paratransit style vehicle, and then 4 years for the smaller passenger vehicles like minivans. And so we try to get on a good schedule. We received that grant in 2020 or 2021, and obviously we're implementing it in phases. Last thing we want to do is replace all of our vehicles at once, because this grant replaced just shy of 16 vehicles. Last thing we want to do is replace all of those vehicles at once, and then in 12 years, we're right back in the same boat with an aged fleet. So we have purposely delayed the purchase of some of these vehicles and ordered them in smaller groups so that it put us in a better position for fleet replacement and turnover over the years, and hopefully maintain a state of good repair if this funding stays sustained. And then we have about $30 million of grants in the books. Probably about half of that is operating and including local match amounts in it. But our biggest projects that we have ongoing right now are the ITS implementation. We've talked so much about the new technology, and that is our biggest focus right now, is transitioning there and recognizing that that's not going to be just a turnkey thing. That's going to take some time, some beta testing, obviously some development and customization. We have roughly $300,000 left to continue purchasing updated maintenance equipment. Our fleet has changed. Vehicles have changed since 1995 when our maintenance facility was constructed. And so making sure that we have safe, operable equipment for our mechanics and our technicians and also making sure that it meets the needs of our changing fleet. So when our facility was built, we didn't have minivans, and our equipment isn't necessarily designed to support minivans. So making sure that we have the appropriate equipment. We were able to secure, actually, that grant, I believe, came from BCATS. And then we also still have that ongoing grant for revenue vehicles as well as administrative vehicles. As we've said before, we have a history of kind of being the hand-me-down. When somebody's done with something, they're like, you guys want it? And that's what our administrative vehicles pretty much are. We have a couple that we got from DPW, and when they were done with them. So it's time for us to grow up, have our own vehicles, and be able to utilize those. An example, our drivers use them as shuttle vehicles. If you've been to our facility, you know we're not located downtown at the transfer center. And so for our drivers to go back and forth, or for our supervisors to be able to respond to an incident on the road or an accident on the road, they need a reliable vehicle that indicates they are an official, not just somebody pulling up in their own personal vehicle. And then bus stop improvements. Christy recently secured a grant that allows us to expand solar lighting and e-paper signs to some of our bus stops. And so she is working with that vendor to establish the timeline for implementation and evaluate those bus stops that will receive those improvements. We also have communications equipment, new radios. So as our system expands and grows, we obviously identified that our radio system is restricted to the city of Battle Creek. It doesn't reach Albion. And so we are slowly upgrading to a cellular-based radio system and ensuring that we have accessible communication across the entire county. And we aren't requiring drivers to use a cell phone while driving because that is illegal. Computer equipment. Again, we have very old computer equipment. We are on roughly I'm gonna say a 7-year replacement cycle for computers, which is in computer years is kind of old.
Yeah.
So we are updating right now. Brendan is working on doing computer and furniture, because our furniture, as usual, is hand-me-down kind of stuff like, hey, this was in the basement of City Hall. Do you guys want it? So giving us a chance to spend down some of this money, get some new stuff in there. And then obviously I already talked about the A&E and design services. Just some of the projects we have going on. And then we'll move into the implementation phases and communications. This is a super easy one slide kind of thing to work out. My suggestion and my experience is that we take small bites of this implementation, focus on doing it right, not quick. And we break this down into sprints. So I don't know how many people are familiar with the agile concept, but we're gonna break it off into smaller, more manageable bites and sprint through those things. So I'm proposing 90-day sprints where we tackle small things over 90 days, and we're just gonna look at this next 6 months. So that would be phase 1 and phase 2 in this first 6-month period. Focusing on community outreach and education is gonna be key. Making sure the community understands what's changing, but also not just the community, our staff. So obviously there's uncertainty, there's questions, and making sure that our staff has just as much information as the public, if not beforehand, so that they're not feeling like they're gonna be displaced. And keeping in mind, we're merging together 2 entirely different systems and asking them to come together. It's, you know, we're creating a blended family now that we wanna be conscious of. The operational agreement between the cities of Battle Creek and the cities of Battle Creek and Marshall and the authority will be effective October 1st. And that is essentially us utilizing each of those cities to maintain their existing central services until we have ours stood up completely. So that would be things like payroll, employees, vehicles, all of those central services that exist right now. The TACC is entering into an agreement with each of those cities to maintain that while we work through the formal separation and transition. we want to make sure that employees aren't harmed and the community isn't harmed, and that we have an opportunity to evaluate pensions, benefits, health insurance, and what all of the implications of this transition mean for those things and the people who are covered under them. Obviously, our goal is to fully separate from both of the cities and stand alone as an authority, but we don't see an immediate rush to that where we need to just separate now and go on. We are working on staffing and organizational restructuring. So obviously, as we continue to grow, we need more hands on deck. One thing that Battle Creek Transit is very lean in the administrative team. To Eric's point earlier, we make a lot of things happen at I'm gonna say the cost of work-life balance. And I would love for our team to actually be able to work a normal 40-hour week. I don't think anybody in the transit department works a normal 40-hour week. Eric, I'm looking at you. The team truly is fully invested in what we do. And it's become the norm that we all just work until the task is done because we don't have enough resources to be able to equitably distribute the work. So as we work on staffing, organization, and restructuring, we'll be creating new positions at the administrative level, and to Eric's earlier point, fully developing out the rest of the org chart to create one paths for advancement for our current employees. So one of the downfalls to having such a lean team is that there's me, there's second line, and then there's front line, and that's it. There isn't a path for advancement for people to see this as a career. They see it as a job. And I would like to create opportunities for people to move up while working here and have 25, 30 years, maybe not all in the same position as a driver or as a mechanic. One of the big changes that we'll be seeing in the interim is, for those of you who haven't met, Brendan Pizzala will be joining the transit team from the city of Battle Creek as the chief safety officer. And he'll be coming to the transit side to focus on operations. So during this transitionary period up to October 1st, Brendan is going to essentially be Mallory, but for Battle Creek Transit instead of TACC.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, have you been paying attention?
Names in there.
So, Brendan, you work for the city of Battle Creek right now?
Yep, absolutely.
Where do they think you are?
Right now,
Yeah.
in a meeting with Battle Creek Transit.
Oh, okay. Right. Sorry, Commissioner. Look, I put him on the spot. No, I mean, so they're fully on board
They're
and
aware.
aware
Yep.
and
We've had-
supporting.
We have had conversations with, so obviously Brendan reports right now, he reports to the Human Resources Director. And I've had conversations with the Human Resources Director and the city manager that this is the transition we're making, and they're on board. Obviously, we've agreed to share Brendan for a minute so that they can transition him out and into transit. But Brendan has been part of the transit team since I started in 2019. And we've just slowly taken a little bit more of his time over the years. Before it was kind of just a check-in here and there, and now we've made a full transit nerd out of him.
Cool.
Right, okay.
Yeah, good luck with that. Their transition is horrible. It's good. Thank you.
Obviously, again, over the next 90 days, starting October 1st, we want to focus on getting those vehicles cycled through, branding, recognizing that the vehicles, in order to wrap it has to be out of service, right? So you can't wrap it while it's driving down the road. So we want to make sure that we're strategic about how we do that. If that means that the third party comes in on the weekends, or that we hold vehicles in appropriately and we're not scheduling, because remember, we schedule rides out 2 weeks in advance. So making sure that we are working on the back end to get all of these vehicles through so that they can be wrapped and branded for Ride Calhoun. So we could start seeing some Ride Calhoun vehicles actually on the road, I'm hoping by September. And that's conversations we're working through with the marketing team right now and finding a vendor that can fit us in.
But you think that all of them should be wrapped by the end of the year?
Yes, my goal would be to have all of the vehicles cycled through by December 31st. Yep. And then obviously our focus is to start ramping up services to a sustainable level. We don't want to just throw a bunch of service out there. I want to make sure people have cleared probation. I want to make sure people are comfortable in this role before we start adding service out, because the last thing we want to do is have to cut it back if we experience any staffing changes. So we're starting to wrap up some staffing, and I anticipate us being able to deploy additional vehicles to the platform within that next quarter. Now, I would say we have 2 more vehicles being delivered and 1 vehicle that we're looking to retire. So net 1 at least, but my goal would be to shoot for 2, with one of those being the new electric van that we're working for.
When you say probation, you're talking about people who are new employees?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. I want to make sure that they're a good fit. They stay before we count our chickens before the egg hatches. Yeah. And then we have a lot of materials to develop. We have bus passes and fare media, right, that we need to get branded under Ride Calhoun or develop under Ride Calhoun, riders guides, route maps, things like that, we haven't had at Battle Creek Transit for a long time. And again, using the marketing and communications team to really help us flush out what those look like, rather than staff using word art, which is history, to make a pamphlet or a brochure. Not that anybody has done a bad job. Christy's done a great job with our stuff, but let's utilize the team that we have with the marketing. And then we have funding set aside under the congressionally directed spending that the TACC was awarded to do a fixed route study. My goal would be that by December 31st, we at least have the RFP developed to be distributed. And really for that study, we are looking for an outside company to come in, evaluate our fixed route bus service, and determine what optimizations need to be made to fit within obviously our budget, but also our service area and the way that we operate our service. So whether that means more frequent service with fewer buses, or creating routes and systems that interconnect within the community rather than requiring a trip down to the transfer center. So that I would hope we have the RFP fully developed by the end of that first quarter, and we're getting ready to release it, or it be released by December 31st. And then Christy will begin working on those bus stop improvements this first quarter, with our hope being that those bus stop improvements are done in quarter 2, which would be our phase 2. For phase 2, which would be quarter 2 of our fiscal year, continue that community outreach and education. Vehicle delivery and deployment. I anticipate some of our vehicles, including our newer fixed route buses, being delivered within that second quarter. At that point, I would say that if staffing allows, we should look at increasing our service hours. That was one of the things, Tommy, you asked at one of the public meetings that we did, what's more important to you? And it seemed pretty clear to me that increased hours of service was the priority over days of service. But as we talk about that community outreach and education, using the community as a sounding board to reaffirm that, are we focusing on increasing service hours or days first? Initially, our thought right now is it's service hours. We hear frequently both fixed route and demand responsive services need to run longer. Obviously, as we continue through this transition, the TACC will need to bargain a contract with ATU. The city has extended the contract or negotiated a 1-year contract that expires June 30th of 2026. And so the TACC will prepare for bargaining likely end of quarter 1, beginning of quarter 2, so that they have a new contract in place by July 1. I would not want to see ATU's contract expire prior to us begin implementing a new contract. And then technology implementation. I anticipate at that point, we have at least a beta testing platform that we would be working within for that ITS CAD AVL. So we could start communicating and working with the marketing company as well as the technology company to develop educational materials for people to make that transition from our existing BC Go app to the new Ride Calhoun app. So I would expect the soft launch of that app by the end of Q2, but not yet available to the public at that point. And then the fixed route study would start at that time. Hopefully the bus stop improvements, weather permitting, would be completed in Q2. And in that case, we would see solar lighting and those e-paper signs available at all of the bus stops. And then coordinating with that technology deployment and implementation, using the real-time GTFS data from the vehicle, it would talk to those bus stop signs and let people know in real time how far away their bus is. So your bus is arriving in 5 minutes and so on. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. We're making big moves in a
I
short amount of
love
time.
it. I
Yeah.
love it.
And then we would continue that ramping up phase for staff to anticipate additional expansions in days and hours of service into Q3, recognizing obviously that we need to start preparing for that in Q2. This is my recommendation for how we can, I always say, take one bite out of the elephant at a time. This does not include kind of the behind the scenes things that are going on right now, like working with the accounting firm to set up our accounting software and HR software and things like that. Those are all things that are ongoing right now from, I'm gonna say, my seat. And then luckily I have my team here to help us achieve these other things within these sprints. Q2, I would come back to you guys with kind of the next 2 phases or the next 2 sprints for us to accomplish, and obviously give you updates on these tasks as we go on. Are there any thoughts or questions?
You look like you have something to say.
No. No, I like clarity. I like clarity. You hear where I'm coming?
It's very clear. I'm like,
You
wow.
are thinking a lot.
Well,
Congratulations.
Well, I'm just gonna point out the obvious. So thank you very much. And thank you for all the work that's been done in the 40 hours that you don't spend doing routes and things of that nature. Given the signed documents and the agreements and so on and so forth, this is what the board will have, governance wise, will have one employee. And that would be the executive director, CEO, or whatever you want to call them. I'm not into titles right now. But these are the actions that over the next 90 days, 6 months, we can hold our one employee to in terms of managing the system for that. So I have to say that from a managerial perspective in terms of so that there's clarity, because sometimes, you know, when you have a board of directors, we're not here to get into the minutia. We are here to make sure we support our one employee's direction and resources to get these things done and not add other things to this list without coming to this body and discussing that with ourselves and the leadership. So I say that for a reason, because that's all part of board governance and board maintenance and so on and so forth. And I know they have varied experience, but that's intrinsically important here because we don't have a huge organization yet to lean on one way or the other. So it can get very confusing very quickly. I've been a part of, I didn't create it, but I've been a part of some real nightmare scenarios where governance and day-to-day management is very convoluted. And I don't want that to occur here. Having said that, all right. Any questions about what Mallory just presented other than outside of what I just understand?
I would like to say, I seem like I've missed several meetings, but this is phenomenal. Thank you very much. You know, very comprehensive and understandable.
Thank you.
Okay. So we go next.
I will end, we got this done in 2 hours. I'm happy. I will end with our notice to you as the board that we will hold 2 community events at the end of September. This will give us as the board and as our staff an opportunity to start meeting with the public face to face, where we come to them rather than expecting the public to come to our public meetings. we anticipate these two meetings being held, one in Battle Creek and one in Albion. Exact locations still being worked out, but at community centers within each of those cities that are accessible to the public. I will be sending out, after this meeting, I will be sending out a doodle poll to gauge dates at the end of September that work for each of you, where we can have full board participation at both meetings. So, for all staff and all board members to be able to attend and face-to-face with the public is gonna be huge, and for us to be able to answer questions directly. We're working with King Media to essentially create kind of the run of show. This is what it'll look like. This is how we envision the community's first time meeting all of us, and really push that communication out to the public on what they can expect. How do we break down kind of those phases of implementation for the public to digest and understand what's changing for me? Yeah, that's great, but what's changing for me and when? And also a chance for them to provide feedback. So, you know, I imagine it as an open house style where each of us has an opportunity to stand there, greet the community and answer questions directly, but making sure that everybody here is on the same page with where we're going and when.
Are we thinking these will be daytime, nighttime, like what?
We have been considering one of each. Having one daytime event in one of the communities and a nighttime event in the other, have not completely flesh that out yet. Yeah. But so we will be sending out the doodle poll and getting something locked in on the calendars, along obviously confirming that date with each of the community centers. But our hope is that we have at least one vehicle wrapped by that time to be able to have the vehicle available, as well as to be able to have some materials to distribute, whether it's flyers, swag, really just looking to get people excited and engaged about Ride Calhoun. So more to come on that, and Eric and I would keep you updated on what that looks like and what the expectations for the board are, as far as your attendance there.
And we'll be getting board swag and things of that nature.
So will we get some Ride Calhoun gear,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
wearable gear?
Yes,
Nice.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, and so, you know, we'll be, you know, the team will be coming out, folks are excited.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, wherever we can, once we get these things wrapped, whatever we can do to participate in other community things. And keep in mind, it's gonna take a little bit of all of us. Because we have 4 communities we're servicing, not just one.
Yeah.
So, you know, I laugh because I'm reminiscing on Linda going, we need to be in the Festival Forest Parade. And all of us were excited, but none of us could attend. And Linda carried that banner. Myself, draped around her. I don't even know what that looked like, but she was, I said, because I called her later that day. I said, oh my God, you know, I had my kids and stuff. I said, Melinda, I'm sorry. And I said, did you do that? Yeah, I marched with the flag by myself. I'm like, you did? I'm gonna have this image of her wrapping this thing around her to get that done.
Actually, she carried it.
She carried it like that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine carrying it down, walking down
A
the
lot.
street a long way?
It was hot.
She did that. So, no, there'll be a variety of outreach and, you know, shared pieces for us to participate in, and, we wanna do as much as we can to.
Well, the festival is the weekend of the 20th. Are you able to participate this time, you think?
August 20th,
September.
September 20th. I will check.
Since we don't have Linda, and I'm not campaigning, so I guess I'll
You
have
can
to carry it this time.
Well, I'm hoping we don't have to walk.
What you mean?
That we'll
We
have a
could use a
vehicle.
vehicle.
Yeah. Have you been at the meeting?
We're going to be outside greeting the citizens and shaking hands and giving brochure. We'll be sitting in a vehicle
Oh,
In
you're
a
talking about
parade.
that part?
for the parade.
Oh, okay, yeah, we'll work that out. I know you're
Hang out
looking
for
at me,
windows.
you're not gonna get me in a commitment mode And I know how you are, baby. So, okay, what else do we have? We have things coming up. And I think that King Media is putting together a publicity workshop for us.
A media training.
A media training workshop, okay? And because one thing that we Friday, and we've been discussing how do we approach us getting approached for a variety of subject matters. And I think that we'll end up with, and they're working on this for us, a policy of one confluence of media information and outlet for this board. So, for instance, somebody catches you and says, hey, bears suck. I need you to tell me what you did. And they want you to be on Channel 4. We have a.
I needed you to call.
No,
my chair.
there we go. We would have a standard talking point of, we have our media folks, please coordinate with them. And a good example that I used at the last meeting is, they would reach out to a Channel 4, get from Channel 4 what the story was and what they needed from us, and then pick the best communication method of getting that done, if not drafting a statement to them prior to that.
Mhm.
So prior to us showing up, we shouldn't get caught off guard by media, and there's an organized way of doing that. That's the way I like to approach my media. No one, they may call, they'll find your phone number. I'm just tell you that right now. They'll find your cell phone number or whatever. I haven't had anybody show up at my house yet, but they will call you and say, hey, can you got time for a statement? And my immediate response is no. Here's my email. Tell me what your questions are, and then we can organize a meeting and so on and so forth. And so, that's not to say crazy things can't happen, but you have control over the narrative, the dialogue and what have you. So King will be going through a lot of that. For some of us, we've had exposure to that. For others, we have not. But it doesn't matter what level of exposure. We don't want to get caught into kind of a tricky situation publicly. Cool. All right. Hey, the bell tells me that we're on time. And do we have anything else for the good of the group? I see that on the statement, on the agenda, our next meeting is August 26th. And barring no special meetings or anything like that, and we'll come back together, but Mallory's real good about giving standard updates. Okay.
Yes.
Can I create a distraction? Mallory was kind enough to show a couple of us some of the new vehicles, the snazzy vehicles that exist in the. I pass the bus depot every day, and I'm like, oh, there they are. And then there's a little bit of new inventory where you slap BCT on the side. And you know what? I'm such a transportation nerd. I can see it outside of one of my offices. They're going, they didn't tell me you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, dude, get over yourself. Get over it. But it's kind of slick because in a very clean, professional way, those things can be transitioned. They look really nice. So if you're interested in seeing what we call the party buses now, look like, and what have you, they're pretty slick. No, if you go down there.
Nothing like seeing it in person.
Yeah, and the other cool thing, I'm just gonna tell you, is the Battle Creek City Transit team knows who you are. All of you, okay? And some of us more than others, and they are very receptive and pay attention when we show up and are interested in what they do. You have time to swing in there for 10, 15 minutes. It's not a whole lot of walking or anything like that, but it is kind of neat to see what we have right now, because in the future, I guarantee you, we will have discussion about facilities and things of that nature, and it's important. Whatever you think a bus facility looks like now is not what we got.
It sure is not.
So it's good. It's not bad, but it could be better.
They need a new facility.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Having said that, I'll go ahead and call the workshop adjourned. Thank you very much for all of your input. think we made a lot of progress.